the journalisms by way of analytic aggregation, illuminated from the analytic research of a historiographer, neither from the Oriental nor the Occidental. Your engagement through a like, a share, and a sub will accelerate us at warp speed towards the continuation of our mission to truthfully go where no news will have been going before.
Engage impulse engines. Engage. Engage.
Engage.
Engage. Engage. Engage. Engage.
Engage.
Engage. Engage. Engage. Engage. Engage. Engage.
Captain.
Engage emergency override.
Engage. Engage. Engage.
Engage forward shields, 35%.
Engage.
Engage the cloaking device.
Engage.
Of them. Engage them in conversation.
Engage. Engage.
Saudis end Yemen Ansarullah war. Watch this space. Ansarullah Houthis announce agreement with Saudi Arabia to stop ongoing war in Yemen, according to Shafaq.com. The Yemeni group Ansarullah announced on Saturday that they had reached an understanding with Saudi Arabia to stop the ongoing war in Yemen and bring peace to the country. Mohammed al-Bukaiti, a member of the political bureau of Ansarullah, confirmed the agreement in an interview with the Al Mayadeen channel. The understanding includes all files related to the truce and achieving comprehensive and lasting peace. Ansarullah indicates that it will support any Saudi approach to peace with Yemen or other parties in the axis of resistance. The comprehensive solution will be in 2 stages, with the first stage expected to be before Eid al-Fitr. Al-Bukaiti denied the relationship between Ansarullah and the ongoing consultations in Riyadh between the Yemen Leadership Council and Saudi leadership regarding the Yemen file, stating that Saudi Arabia is a party to the war. The UAE's also started withdrawing its military forces from Yemen, with Ansarullah having almost certain information that it intends to keep some Yemeni islands, which Ansarullah does not accept, regarding the Yemeni dialogue. Al-Bukaiti called on Yemeni political components to accelerate dialogue with Sana'a to reach a Yemeni solution. He also revealed Western pressure led by the United States on Saudi Arabia and the UAE to continue the aggression and siege. Al-Bukaiti believed that the withdrawing the Saudi and Emirati forces and American, French, and British troops is necessary to achieve a comprehensive peace in Yemen. The ongoing war in Yemen, which began in 2015, has claimed the lives of 377,000 people, inflicted cumulative losses estimated at $126 billion on the Yemeni economy, and left 80% of the Yemeni people in need of humanitarian aid, according to the UN. The conflict has had devastating consequences to the Yemeni people, including a humanitarian crisis that has left millions of Yemenis facing severe food and water shortages, displacement, and disease outbreaks. The conflict has also resulted in significant damage to infrastructure and institutions, including hospitals and schools. From Tasnim News Agency, UAE withdraws from Yemen as Saudi Omani delegation arrives for ceasefire talks. The United Arab Emirates officially began withdrawing from Yemen, according to Mohammed al-Bukaiti, a senior member of Yemen's Ansar Allah movement, and the government of Dhamar province. Al-Bukaiti announced that there's an understanding with Saudi Arabia regarding Yemen, with disclosing details. In an interview with Al-Mayadeen, Al-Bukaiti stated that the UAE's participation with Saudi Arabia in the aggression against Yemen was a big mistake, and the UAE should learn the lesson and fully withdraw. Al-Bukaiti emphasized that any Saudi attempts to achieve peace with Yemen would strengthen the Saudi position. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia and Oman are seeking to broker a ceasefire agreement between the warring parties in Yemen. A Saudi delegation led by Mohammed al-Jaber and accompanied by an Omani delegation is expected to arrive in the capital Sana'a in the next 2 days to hold discussions on fully reopening Yemeni ports and airports, paying public sector employees salaries, reconstruction, and political transition. Reuters reported that if an agreement is reached, the parties may announce it before the Eid al-Fitr holiday, which begins on April 20th. According to Al-Bukaiti, the conditions for achieving a ceasefire differ from those for achieving peace. The agreement on the ceasefire before Eid al-Fitr will be carried out in 2 stages, he explained. He also called on the Yemenis involved in the aggression not to miss the opportunity. Meanwhile, efforts to end the aggression on Yemen and lift the siege on it would continue through negotiations, according to Mohammed Abdul Salam, the spokesman for the Houthi Ansar Allah movement and head of their negotiating delegation. Allah willing, the efforts will culminate in a peace agreement that meets the demands of the Yemeni people from Saada to Mara, he tweeted. Abdul Wahab al-Mabisi, a member of the Ansar Allah Political Bureau, stressed that the Iranian-Saudi agreement is positive and will have an impact on the Yemeni people. Riyadh also reportedly informed the Presidential Council of its decision to end the war and close the Yemeni file permanently. From abonews.com, the Saudi-Yemeni war is likely to end after 8 years. And from the Kashmiriyat.co.uk, amid Saudi and Iran talks, 8-year-old Yemen war may end. Riyadh has informed the Yemeni Presidential Leadership Council of its decision to end the war and close the Yemen file once and for all, informed Yemeni news reporters said on Friday. Ashaq al-Awsat reported that new efforts are underway to resolve the Yemeni crisis as it enters its 9th year. An informed Yemeni source revealed to the source that a comprehensive peace document is being drafted. Sponsored by China, the finishing touches are being made to the draft that cover several phases. First phase of the peace would include a nationwide ceasefire, the reopening of all land, air, and sea routes, the merger of the central banks, and complete prisoner swap deals. Meanwhile, Saudi Defense Minister Prince Khalid bin Salman reiterated the kingdom's constant support to Yemen. He held talks in Riyadh with the chairman of the Yemeni Presidential Leadership Council, Dr. Rashad al-Alimi. The minister underlined Saudi Arabia's backing of the work of the PLC as it pursues security and stability in Yemen. Pertinently, tens of thousands of civilians have been killed in Yemen during the last 11 years in Saudi bombings. Saudi claimed that it was fighting the Ansar Allah coalition or government and Iran-backed militia and maintained it didn't attack any civilian areas. Children were the worst victims of the Saudi-led aggression. More than 80,000 children died of hunger in Yemen since 2015. Another 1.8 million children under 5 in Yemen are acutely malnourished, as per local NGOs in Yemen. To help end the Yemen war, all China had to do was be reasonable, according to The Intercept. With Joe Biden nowhere to be found, China's diplomacy set the stage for Saudi concessions and ceasefire talks. The war in Yemen looks like it's coming to an end. U.S. media reported on Thursday that a ceasefire extending through 2023 has been agreed to, but those reports also include Al-Ansar Allah government denials. On Friday, Al-Mayadeen, a generally pro-Ansar Allah Lebanese news outlet, reported optimism from the Ansar Allah side that the deal's real and the war is winding down. Reuters later on Friday matched Al-Mayadeen's reporting, confirming that Saudi envoys will be traveling to Sana'a to discuss the terms of a permanent ceasefire. What's startling here is the apparent role of China and complete absence of the U.S. and President Joe Biden in the deal-making. Biden promised to end the war in Yemen 2 years into his presidency. China may have delivered on that promise, said Trita Parsi, executive vice president of the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft. Decades of militarized American foreign policy in the Middle East have enabled China to play the role of peacemaker, while Washington stuck and unable to offer much more than arms deals and increasingly unconvincing security assurances. The U.S. always backed Saudi Arabia to the hilt and vociferously opposed the Ansar Allah, who are backed by Iran. Now China has extracted concessions from the Saudis that made the ceasefire talks possible. The Saudis seem like they're fully capitulating to the Ansar Allah demands, which include opening the major port to allow critical supplies into the country, allowing flights into Sana'a, and allowing the government to have access to its currency to pay its workers and stabilize the economy. Reasonable stuff. The Saudi concessions, including a potential lifting of the blockade and exit from the war, demonstrate that their priority is to protect Saudi territory from attack and focus on economic development at home, said Eric Sperling, executive director of Just Foreign Policy, which has been working for an end to the war in Yemen for years. This diverges from the approach preferred by many Washington foreign policy elites who continue to hope that the Saudi war and blockade could force the Ansar Allah government to make concessions and cede more power to the U.S.-backed Yemeni government. The Yemen deal is undergirded by another China-brokered deal for rapprochement between Iran and Saudi Arabia. On Thursday, the Iranian and Saudi foreign ministers met in Beijing to finalize an agreement that reinstates direct flights between Riyadh and Tehran, reopens embassies, and expands commercial cooperation. The full scope of this appears to have been unlikely without the Saudi-Iranian normalization brokered by China, Parsi said. Whether China played a crucial role in the Yemeni dimension is unclear. Beijing will, however, get some credit for it because of its role in bringing Riyadh and Tehran together. U.S. policy toward the Yemen conflict has been so hostile to peace it managed to do the impossible, make Saudi Arabia appear reasonable in comparison. The Wall Street Journal reported Thursday that the U.S. is deeply frustrated at how reasonably various parties are behaving. In an unannounced visit to Saudi Arabia earlier this week, CIA Director William Burns expressed frustration with the Saudis. According to people familiar with the matter, he told Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman that the U.S. has felt blindsided by Riyadh's rapprochement with Iran and Syria, countries that remain heavily sanctioned by the West. Under the auspices of Washington's global rivals, this is all part of a larger program of Chinese diplomacy, as opposed to U.S. saber-rattling in the Middle East. The Iranian Ministry of Foreign Affairs said publicly that he's also held an expansive 2-hour meeting with his French counterpart while she was also in China. The meetings came ahead of a planned regional summit that will be organized by China and include both Saudi Arabia and Iran. With the Saudis no longer backing militants in the Yemen war, those rump factions won't have much capacity left to fight, though there will still probably be some clashes before a final peace is reached. Some observers say, or have said, that U.S. could still aid efforts to bring the war to its ultimate close. Now is the time for the United States to do everything it can to support these negotiations to finally end the war and support robust humanitarian funding to address the suffering of the Yemeni people, said Hassan al-Tayyab, the legislative director for Middle East policy at the Friends Committee on National Legislation. If Washington rejects regional power sharing and obstructs a world in which other nations have a vested interest in peace, it risks jeopardizing America's own economic and security interests and its international reputation. Now's the time to prioritize and reap the benefits of diplomacy, not reject those who advocate for it. The way the war is ending also underscores just how illegitimate the U.S.-backed government of Yemen has been the last several years. In reality, its group of exiles living in hotels in Riyadh, fully propped up by and under the thumb of Saudi Arabia. For a while, Saudi Arabia was referring to it in official documents as the legitimate government of Yemen, though it didn't actually govern and had no legitimacy outside its hotel. The exiled government's now led by the Presidential Leadership Council, and look at how the news is delivered to the legitimate government of Yemen, according to Al-Mayadeen. The sources stated that Riyadh informed the Presidential Leadership Council of its decision to end the war and conclude the Yemeni file permanently. Such was the ignoble end of the U.S.-recognized government of Yemen. If Saudis are smart to cut their losses in their complicity in this human rights nightmare and refocus their attention to their own economic development. While the Houthis are a deeply flawed movement, it's both immoral and ineffective to try to counter them by pushing tens of millions of Yemenis to the brink of starvation, said Sperling. The Saudis are smart to cut their losses in their complicity in this human rights nightmare and refocus their attention to their own economic development. The Chinese may find, however, that running a constellation of satellites is harder than it looks, and that brokering peace may be more difficult than keeping it. This week, Iran-allied groups in Lebanon launched airstrikes on Zionist-occupied Palestine in response to a raid on Al-Quds' holy Al-Aqsa mosque by Zionist police. Zionist-occupied Palestine, which has moved increasingly closer to Saudi Arabia, responded to the rockets by attacking both Gaza and Lebanon. President Xi Jinping will have no shortage of disputes to work out at his upcoming summit. And from globalvillagespace.com, Islamic world should be united against. Actually, watch this space. We're going to transition to another story. Remember, your engagement through a like, a share, and a sub will accelerate us at warp speed towards the continuation of our mission to truthfully go where no news will have been going before. From globalvillagespace.com, Islamic world should be united against Zionist attacks in Palestine, Turkish president. In phone call, Recep Tayyip Erdogan urges Iranian counterpart Raisi to jointly continue efforts in international platforms to preserve status of holy places. Erdogan and Ebrahim Raisi spoke over the phone and discussed Turkey-Iran relations and regional issues, including Zionist attacks on Al-Aqsa Mosque and the occupied Al-Quds. Turkey's communications directorate said in a statement, emphasizing that common sense should prevail to prevent a new spiral of violence. Erdogan said that it would be beneficial to take initiatives to guide all parties to common sense, calling on Raisi to jointly continue efforts in international platforms, especially in the Organization of Islamic Cooperation and the UN, to preserve the status of holy places. Erdogan said it's important to demonstrate unity, particularly in the face of recent attacks such as the burning of the Holy Quran in West Asian cities. In a telephone conversation with his Indonesian counterpart, Joko Widodo on Thursday, Iran's President Ibrahim Raisi denounced Zionist actions at Al-Aqsa Mosque in occupied Al-Quds. Raisi told Widodo that supporting the rights of Palestinians and fighting Zionist-occupied Palestine is an unchangeable principle in the structure of the Islamic Ummah, describing Palestine as a beating heart of the Islamic world. Raisi emphasized the importance of holding an emergency session of the 57-member body of Muslim countries on the prevailing situation in Palestine. He further stressed that the unity of the Islamic world is essential to confront Zionist aggression, while reaffirming Iran's support to efforts at strengthening unity between Islamic countries. The statement further said that Indonesian president welcomed the proposal to convene the special OIC summit and make a joint decision to defend Palestine. Tensions have been running high in East Al-Quds after Zionist forces stormed the Al-Aqsa Mosque for the second time on Wednesday after arresting hundreds of Palestinians during the first raid. The raids come as Palestinian Muslims were offering special Ramadan prayers at Al-Aqsa, and Jews were celebrating Passover, which prompted Palestinian groups in Gaza to launch rocket attacks in retaliation. During the second raid on Wednesday, Zionist forces reportedly tossed stun grenades and forced Muslim worshippers to leave. The incidents have drawn widespread condemnation from Muslim countries, with Jordan on Wednesday calling for an extraordinary meeting of the Arab League to discuss the developments. From onlineindia.com, Turkey and Iran call for Muslim unity against Zionist-occupied Palestine. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and his Iranian counterpart Ibrahim Raisi on Friday discussed in a phone conversation on the escalation of tensions following Zionist-occupied Palestine raids on the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound in Al-Quds earlier this week. Turkey's presidency said in a statement during the conversation, Erdogan underlined the importance of uniting the Islamic world against Zionist-occupied Palestine attacks in Palestine, especially in the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound, according to the statement. In order to prevent a new spiral of violence, Erdogan said that it would be beneficial to take initiatives to guide all parties to common sense. He called for joint efforts to preserve the status of holy places, of international platforms, particularly the Organization of Islamic Cooperation and the United Nations. For his part, Raisi denounced the crimes committed by Zionist-occupied Palestinians against Palestinians, particularly the attacks on worshippers of the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound and the desecration of the holy site. He called for an emergency OIC meeting to discuss measures to deal with the Zionist-occupied Palestine hostility. Raisi also condemned the Zionist entity's recent acts of aggression against Syria and Lebanon. Just a moment. And he stressed the need for greater unity among Muslim states in confronting such actions by Zionist-occupied Palestine. The Iranian president emphasized the necessity of respecting the territorial integrity of regional countries, saying its crucial solution in combating terrorism and separation in the region while supporting the national sovereignty of these states. On Wednesday and Thursday, the Zionist police stormed the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound, the third holiest site for Muslims and the most sacred place for Jews, and detained hundreds of Palestinians. Zionist police said in a statement that dozens of law-breaking youths attempted to barricade themselves inside the mosque to incite riots, which is an entirely and completely manipulated untruth. And from Reutr.com, Erdogan, Islamic world must unite against Zionist attacks. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan called for unity of the Islamic world against Zionist attacks on Palestine. President Turkey Recep Tayyip Erdogan called for the unity of the Muslim world to fight the actions against Palestine or Palestinians in Zionist-occupied Palestine. The Islamic world must unite against Zionist-occupied Palestine's attacks on Palestine, Erdogan told Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi in a telephone call on Friday, a transcript of which was released by the Turkish government. The stance represents a real change for Erdogan, who's led a policy of warming Turkey's ties with Zionist-occupied Palestine. During that time, however, Turkish officials warned that a deterioration in Zionist entity and Palestinian relations would lead to a similar trend in Tel Aviv-Ankara relations. Erdogan stressed that common sense must prevail to prevent a new spiral of violence. Erdogan also asked Raisi to jointly continue efforts on international platforms, especially in the OIC and the UN. Erdogan said it was important to show unity, especially in the face of recent acts such as the burning of Qurans in West Asian cities. The remarks by Erdogan in his office come shortly after the Office of Zionist Foreign Ministry Eli Cohen published its own statement from a phone call he had with Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu, indicating that the Zionists are making progress in convincing Ankara of its position. As part of Foreign Minister Eli Cohen's intensive activities with counterparts in the Middle East and around the world, Minister Cohen spoke today by telephone with Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu to diffuse tensions and send a message to the terror organization Hamas that Israel will respond strongly to continued terrorism and violence, Cohen's office said, as quoted by the Times of Zionist-occupied Palestine Saturday. Hamas is known to have ties to the Turkish government, which has long hosted officials from the group on its territory, and Zionist-occupied Palestine often uses that relationship to convey messages to Hamas. In a message, its counterparts in the Middle East and around the world, Zionist-occupied Palestine will respond strongly to any attempt to harm Zionist citizens. Hamas is responsible for the latest round of escalation on the so-called Temple Mount in Gaza and in Lebanon, and Hamas will pay the price for recent events. Zionist-occupied Palestine is committed to the status quo on the Temple Mount and freedom of worship in Al-Quds for all religions, Cohen's office added. From Al-Mayadeen, Raisi calls for Islamic convergence against Zionist atrocities. Iranian President Raisi on Friday called for a convergence in the Islamic world against the atrocities of the Zionist occupation against Palestinian worshippers at Al-Aqsa Mosque. During a phone call with his Turkish counterpart, Tayyip Erdogan, Raisi slammed the recent Zionist attacks as a desecration of the holy place, while also condemning Zionist aggressions on Syria and Lebanon. The Iranian president reiterated the call for holding an emergency meeting of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation to discuss ways to confront the brutal actions of the Zionist occupation. Raisi also stressed the need to respect the territorial integrity of regional countries, pointing out the most important approach to confront terrorism and separatism is to support the national sovereignty of states. On his part, Erdogan underlined the Islamic world should be united against Zionist attacks in Palestine, as per the Turkish presidency's Directorate of Communications. The Turkish president also called on Tehran to continue efforts to preserve the status of holy places, including the Blessed Al-Aqsa Mosque, at international organizations. This comes as on Thursday the Zionist occupation's military said 34 rockets were launched from southern Lebanon and occupied Al-Jalil. The occupation said that the Iron Dome intercepted 25 of the projectiles, adding that at least 5 rockets landed in occupied Palestine lands. The Times of quote-unquote Israel highlighted that the attack may mark the largest number of rockets fired from Lebanon. This coincided with a Zionist occupation aggression against the Gaza Strip, which was followed by a response from the Palestinian resistance. In addition, Al-Mayadeen correspondent on early Friday confirmed that 3 Zionist missiles landed south of the city of Tyre, or that could be Tyre, or Tyre. 2 of them in agricultural areas and another in the Kaleile plain.
Tyre.
It's pronounced Tyre. The city is pronounced Tyre. The Israeli occupation military spokesman claimed that the Zionist army attacked Hamas infrastructure and sites in southern Lebanon. And from Memo, Islamic world should be united against Zionist attacks in Palestine, Turkish president. The Islamic world should be united against Zionist attacks in Palestine, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan told his Iranian counterpart on Friday, reports Anadolu agency. Erdogan and Ibrahim Raisi spoke over the phone and discussed Turkey-Iran relations and regional issues, including Zionist attacks on Al-Aqsa Mosque in the occupied Al-Quds, Turkey's communication director said in a statement, emphasizing that common sense should be the prevailing thought to prevent a new spiral of violence. Erdogan said that it would be beneficial to take initiatives to guide all parties to common sense, calling on Raisi to jointly continue efforts in international platforms, especially in the OIC and the UN, to preserve the status of the holy places. Erdogan said it's important to demonstrate unity, particularly in the face of recent attacks such as the burning of the Quran in European cities. And from TRT World, Erdogan to Raisi, Islamic world should unite against Zionist aggression. In a phone call, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan urges his Iranian counterpart, Ibrahim Raisi, to jointly continue efforts on international platforms to preserve the status of holy places in Palestine. The Islamic world should be united against Israeli attacks in Palestine. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has told his Iranian counterpart. Erdogan and Ibrahim Raisi spoke over the phone on Friday and discussed Turkey-Iran relations and regional issues, including Zionist attacks on Al-Aqsa Mosque in the occupied Al-Quds, Turkey's communications director said in a statement, emphasizing that common sense should prevail to prevent a new spiral of violence. Erdogan said that it would be beneficial to take initiatives to guide all parties to common sense, calling on Raisi's to jointly continue efforts in international platforms, especially in the Organization of Islamic Cooperation and the UN, to preserve the status of holy places. Erdogan said it's important to demonstrate unity.
Beam me up, Mr. Spark.
Beam me up. Lock on transporters. Beam us up.
Beam us up.
Quickly. Beam us up home.
Beam us up.
Prepare to beam us up, Mr. Scott. Beam us up, Mr. Scott.
Prepare to beam us up.
Scott, prepare to beam us up.
Have Scotty beam us up. Beam us up.
Beam us up.
Scotty, beam us up fast.
Stand by to beam us up.
Scotty, beam me up.
Beam me up.
Beam us up now!
Stand by to beam us up.
No need to beam me up, sir. The situation is under control.